Hey friends, it's Dimitri with Brush for Streetwear. So today I wanted to take a deep dive into taping boxes and make a video about that. Some of you might think that this is a boring video and you're not into that kind of stuff, but others, you might like these deep dives, and I'm going to explain kind of some tips, some tricks, some theory behind taping and what I do, and a course correction that I made. And also, some of you might be wondering, okay, how much tape do I really need in order to send out a box? And that question, it really depends on what you're sending out and where you're sending it to, right? So here is an example of a typical box. I was shipping out a lot of these the other day. We were shipping out hats. And for a hat and a little bit of packaging material, a sticker, and a packing list, right? It doesn't weigh a lot. I think these weigh a little bit over 3 ounces, something like that. So for that, obviously, one tape seam on the top, one tape seam on the bottom, that's all you need, because this isn't really not going to go anywhere. If you are sending out items that are heavier, especially internationally, you might want to add more tape seams, but again, I can't really provide you that information. It really depends on how much it weighs. So if this weighed a lot of pounds, I would probably want to tape these seams as well. But if it's not really that heavy, you'll be able to get away with just 2 tape seams. Even if you get Amazon packages, sometimes they can give you some pretty heavy stuff in a box and it just has 1 tape seam on the top and 1 on the bottom. It still makes it to your door, although once in a while that box might be really like sagging and it's about to give, right? Another thing that you might be wondering is, how wide do I need the tape? I just use normal sized packing tape. That's worked well for me. They also make tape that's a 1/2 inch wider, another inch wider, and I think even wider than that. And that might be useful for you. Let's say that you send a lot of packages internationally and they're heavier. You can get away with using a wider tape seam, just one of them on the top and the bottom, rather than maybe putting multiple tape seams of this. So really study the situation that you're in and what you're sending and where you're sending it to, because using wider tape might be a more viable option for you than just normal tape, and that's something to consider. But for me, I typically only ship clothing and magazines and books like that, so it's not extremely heavy. So just doing 1 tape seam on the top and 1 on the bottom is sufficient for my needs. Now, there are a couple tricks that you should know with using the tape, and from experience, this is what I've learned. So the first thing is, you really want to make sure that you are putting tension on the box when you're squeezing it together, and simultaneously you need that tension on the tape gun. So as you could tell, these flaps are pinched in, and that's a key indicator that you're putting enough tension on the box. If this is not pinched in, and if these are not flush together, that means there's an issue with your taping method and it needs to be corrected. Because when you have enough tension on this box, that tape is really snug on there. Another thing that you want to do is make sure that you're putting on your tape as flat as possible. As you could tell, there's no wrinkles and the tape is very, very straight on here. So I don't always get it like this, but I've been getting better and better at this over the years. So a lot of my tape seams are usually like this. Like I said, here's the other example. This one made it through the postal system, so it's a little bit rougher, but the tape is not like super, wrinkled and all over the place. It's pretty uniform. That helps. When you tape it on, also smooth it out. If you don't smooth it out, if you just put it on and you just kind of just throw it into the box and ship it out, what can happen is the tape seams can obviously come undone. This actually happened to me the other day when I packaged about 40 boxes like this, and I was just kind of going fast, getting them done. And most of them were sufficient, but there was a couple boxes when I got to the post office, the tape right here, this seam, it started to come undone. And you might be wondering, okay, so does that mean that your tape is too cheap and it doesn't have good adherence, not enough glue on there? No, the tape is sufficient because I've been using it for years and I've never really had a problem with it, other than maybe a few times, these flaps would come undone. And like I said, here's an example. This one made it to Arizona and back, so obviously the tape is sufficient and it adheres well enough. So that got me thinking, okay, course correct. So what can I do to kind of avoid that and have peace of mind, knowing that my package is not going to come undone and the contents are going to spill out in the postal system that could damage the contents inside and then make it more of a problem for the post office, because then they might have to, you know, put a bunch of tape on it or something, and then when it gets to the customer, it's not going to look presentable. So what I did now was I created a standard to tape boxes, rather than just, okay, I'm going to put a seam on there and another tape seam on there. The reason why it's important to have standards in your business is because all of this adds up over time. You know, let's say that you are over taping your boxes. Well, if you're over taping your boxes, it's going to take you too long, and B, you're going to be wasting a lot of money. If you're packaging hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of boxes and you're over taping them, you're over processing it essentially, you know, all that money adds up, right? So you don't want to be under taping your boxes, and you don't want to be over taping your boxes. You want to find an appropriate amount that you need for your business. And again, I don't know exactly how much you need, because it depends on the destination and the weight of your boxes. So back to what I was saying, I stopped and did a course correction and made a standard. When you make standards, you avoid variation. Variation equals problems in your business. So for me to have peace of mind, and it makes sense for me, what I do now is, you can see it better on this. When I'm taping these seams down, what I do is on the other side, so that the top and the bottom, I have the seams overlap, and you could tell in there. Do you see that line right there? So these are overlapping. What that does is that it's going to reduce the chances of one of the flaps coming undone, right? By 50%, because you have this flap, this flap, this flap, and this flap, right? So put your tape on flat, get it adhered to well, like smooth down, put one flap over the other. If you do all those things, and if you keep your box and tape in tension, then you will have a higher margin of success getting your boxes out. They'll look really clean and presentable, and you won't have problems that may occur when you ship them out. I know this might sound like something, you know, a little bit overboard, but creating standards and having good protocols is an effective way to avoid defects and problems in your business. And when you train your employees or other team members on how to do it, everyone's doing the same thing. And if any other problems arise from that, you stop and you change direction and you think of a plan, you know, to implement to make your process better. So that's what I do. Those are some tape tips. And let's say that your box is really, really tall. I would say you don't have to have your tape seams overlap, because you're just going to be having like a long piece of tape that's kind of not doing anything. I think an appropriate amount of tape would be to use around 3 to 4 inches when you're taping it down like that on the flap. And like I said, again, if your box is really tall, you basically are just going to be wasting tape if you're going to be just going over it on the sides, right? You just want that appropriate amount of tension. And again, always consider the weight and the destination when you're taping boxes. But if you guys have a clothing brand, and for a majority of you, overall, just doing a good tape seam on the top and a good tape seam on the bottom will be sufficient for sending packages out. And I know this from experience, because I've already sent out like hundreds, thousands of boxes, and I haven't had any problems with that. They've all arrived to the customers just fine. In the past, I did over tape boxes, and I remember I'd be sitting there, I'd be doing tape seam here, tape seam there, tape seams here, and I didn't really think about it until I stopped and be like, okay, this is taking a long time, and I don't like doing this, right? I gotta have a clear standard, you know. And then I switched to just doing tape on the top and the bottom. That worked. But now I have even a better standard of having them overlap, and that's just a little detail that I use now. So those are my taping tips. If you guys got any value out of this video, or if you have any other tips or questions, leave them down in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys later. Thanks.